I always thought my life with Clara was picture perfect. We'd been married for 8 years, built a cozy home in the suburbs, and filled it with laughter, shared dreams, and quiet evenings on the porch sipping wine. She was radiant, long auburn hair, eyes that sparkled like emeralds, and a laugh that could melt the coldest heart. I was a software engineer, steady and predictable, while Clara ran a small boutique downtown, her creativity blooming in every hand-stitched dress she sold. Our days flowed like a well-rehearsed dance, each step familiar, comforting. Mornings began with coffee and kisses. Evenings ended with her head on my chest as we watched old movies. I trusted her implicitly. Why wouldn't I? She was my everything. But lately, something felt off. It started small, subtle shifts I couldn't quite pin down. She'd linger at the boutique longer than usual, claiming late shipments or last-minute customers. Her phone, once carelessly tossed on the counter, now stayed glued to her hand, screen tilted just out of my view. She'd smile when I asked about her day, but the answers were vague, her eyes darting away. I brushed it off at first. Overwork, stress, the natural ebb of a long marriage. Still, a gnawing unease settled in my gut, a quiet whisper I couldn't silence. One Tuesday, I came home early. A client meeting canceled, and I thought I'd surprise her with dinner. The house was silent, her car gone. Odd, since she'd texted me an hour ago saying she was home with a headache. I called her, no answer. A prickling sensation crept up my spine. I drove to the boutique, but it was dark, locked up tight. My mind raced, conjuring excuses. Maybe she'd gone to a friend's or the grocery store. But then I saw it, her car, parked 2 streets over, near the old brick apartment building where her friend Mark lived. Mark, the charming photographer she'd met at an art fair last year. My stomach twisted. I parked a block away, heart pounding, and waited. An hour later, she emerged, hair mussed, adjusting her coat. Mark followed, leaning in close, whispering something that made her laugh. A laugh I hadn't heard in months. They parted with a lingering touch, and I sat there, frozen, as she drove off. The world tilted. My Clara, my wife, with him. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a blade through my chest, sharp and unrelenting. Driving home, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The road blurred, my hands trembling on the wheel. I kept replaying the scene, her laugh, his hand on her arm, the casual intimacy that screamed everything I didn't want to believe. By the time I pulled into our driveway, she was already there, humming in the kitchen like nothing had happened. "Hey, honey," she called, her voice light. "You're early." I mumbled something about work, forcing a smile, but my throat burned with bile. She didn't notice or didn't care, chattering about a new fabric shipment as she chopped vegetables. That night I couldn't sleep. She lay beside me, her breathing soft and even, oblivious to the storm raging in my head. I stared at the ceiling, piecing together the last few months. Her late nights, the secretive texts, the way she'd pull away when I reached for her. How long had this been going on? Was Mark the first or just the latest? The questions clawed at me, each one a fresh wound. I needed proof, something concrete to shatter the denial still clinging to my heart. The next day, I called in sick and waited until she left for the boutique. Then I went to work. Her laptop sat on the desk, password protected, but I knew her habits. She reused the same code for everything, our anniversary. It unlocked with a soft click, and I dove in. Emails first. Nothing obvious, just business and spam. Then her messages, encrypted chats with Mark, dozens of them. "Missed you today," he'd written last week. "Can't wait to see you again," she'd replied, with a heart emoji. My chest tightened. Photos followed, selfies of them together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. One showed her in lingerie I'd never seen, time-stamped from a night she'd claimed to be at a work event. I printed everything, hands shaking as the printer whirred. Each page was a brick in the wall of her deceit, and I built it high, fortifying my resolve. She'd played me for a fool, and I'd let her. But no more. Confronting her wasn't an option. Not yet. Rage simmered beneath my skin, but I needed more than words and tears. I needed her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to understand the wreckage she'd left behind. So I watched her, silent and meticulous. I installed a tracking app on her phone while she showered, synced it to mine, and mapped her every move. The boutique, Mark's apartment, a coffee shop they frequented. She was predictable, brazen even, as if she thought I'd never suspect. I followed her once, tailing her car from a distance. She met him at a park, their hands brushing as they walked, her head tilting up to him with a smile that used to be mine. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, fighting the urge to storm over and rip them apart. Instead, I took photos, grainy but damning. Evidence piled up. Receipts from dinners I hadn't shared, hotel bookings on her credit card, a second phone stashed in her purse with messages that made my vision blur. Nights at home became a performance. She'd kiss my cheek, ask about my day, and I'd nod, swallowing the venom rising in my throat. How was the boutique? I'd ask, testing her. Busy, she'd say, eyes flickering. Lies stacked on lies, and I cataloged everyone. Friends noticed my silence, asked if I was okay. Just tired. I'd lie back, perfecting the mask she'd forced me to wear. I started planning. Revenge wasn't enough. It had to be precise, devastating. I dug into Mark's life next. Social media, public records, a few discreet calls. He was divorced, freelancing, barely scraping by. Clara was his muse, his escape, and soon his downfall. I found his ex-wife's number, left a vague message about mutual interests. She called back, voice sharp with curiosity. "What's this about?" she asked. "Your ex," I said. "And my wife." Silence, then a bitter laugh. "Let's talk." Meeting Mark's ex, Lisa, was like staring into a mirror of my own pain. We sat in a diner, her blonde hair pulled back, eyes hard with years of resentment. "He's a leech," she said, stirring her coffee. "Charming until he gets what he wants. Money, attention, whatever. Destroyed me financially, emotionally." She confirmed what I'd suspected. Mark had a pattern, preying on women who could offer him something. Clara, with her boutique and our savings, was his latest mark. "She's not the first since me," Lisa added. "Won't be the last." I showed her the photos, the messages. Her lip curled. Same old Mark. She agreed to help, eager to see him burn. We brainstormed over greasy fries, her anger fueling mine. She knew his weaknesses: vanity, greed, a fragile ego. I had resources, tech skills, money, time. Together, we could unravel him, and Clara with him. Back home, I kept up the charade. Clara noticed nothing, too wrapped in her secret world. I hacked into Mark's accounts next: email, bank records, even his cloud storage. Amateur passwords made it easy. I found more photos, some intimate, others of Clara in places I didn't recognize. One video, timestamped last month, showed them laughing in a hotel room, her voice soft as she said, "He'll never know." My hands clenched into fists. He wouldn't just know, he'd make them pay. I transferred small amounts from Mark's account to dummy ones I controlled, draining him slowly. Utility bills went unpaid, his credit score tanked. Clara didn't notice, too busy funding their outings. I planted seeds, anonymous tips to his clients about unreliable service, costing him gigs. His life frayed at the edges, and I tightened the noose, waiting for the perfect moment to pull. Clara's birthday was approaching, and I saw my opening. She'd expect a celebration, a night of adoration. Instead, I'd give her a reckoning. I invited friends, family, even Mark, under the guise of a surprise party. "Clara's been working so hard," I told him over the phone, voice warm. "Thought you'd want to toast her." He agreed, smug and oblivious. Lisa helped me set the stage. Catering, decorations, a slideshow of memories. I doctored with the evidence I'd collected. The night arrived, our house buzzing with chatter. Clara glowed, oblivious, accepting hugs and compliments. Mark swaggered in, camera in hand, playing the artist. I smiled, poured drinks, waited. Dinner passed, then dessert. "Time for a toast," I announced, dimming the lights. The projector hummed to life. First innocent photos, our wedding, vacations. Then the shift. Clara and Mark at the park, the hotel receipts, her lingerie selfie. Gasps rippled through the room. Clara froze, face paling. Mark stammered, "What the hell?" I stepped forward, voice steady. 8 years, Clara. I gave you everything. And you gave me this. I gestured to the screen, now showing her texts. He'll never know. The room went silent, eyes darting between us. Her mother sobbed. My brother gripped my shoulder. Clara tried to speak, but I cut her off. Don't. Just leave. Mark bolted, chased by glares. She followed, tears streaming. No words left to save her. That night, alone, I burned her clothes in the backyard, the flames licking away years of lies. It wasn't over. Mark's ruin was next, and I'd savor every step. The days after the party were a blur of silence and ash. Clara didn't come back, didn't call. Her absence echoed through the house, a hollow reminder of the life I'd lost. Friends reached out, their voices thick with pity, but I waved them off. I didn't need sympathy, I needed control. The fire I'd started wasn't just in the backyard. It was in me now, a slow, deliberate burn driving every move. Mark was my next target, and I'd make sure he felt every ember. I tracked him through the app I'd planted on Clara's phone. She hadn't ditched it yet, too rattled to think straight. They were holed up in his dingy apartment, her car a constant fixture outside. I watched from a distance, noting his routines. Late mornings, coffee runs, the occasional gig he still clung to. His life was already crumbling. Clients gone, bank account bleeding. But it wasn't enough. I wanted him broken, stripped bare, a shell of the man who'd thought he could take what was mine. Lisa was my ace. She'd given me dirt on Mark's past, debts he'd dodged, scams he'd pulled. I dug deeper, cross-referencing her tips with public records. He'd skipped out on a lease years ago, leaving a landlord high and dry. I found the guy, a gruff retiree named Tom, and sent him an anonymous packet. Mark's current address, proof of his whereabouts, a nudge to collect what was owed. Within days, Tom was knocking on Mark's door, voice booming about back rent and threats of court. Mark's panicked shouts carried through the thin walls. I heard them from my car, parked a block away, a grim smile tugging at my lips. Clara's boutique was next. She'd built it with my support, my money, my encouragement, and I'd be damned if she kept it. I contacted her suppliers, posing as her assistant, and canceled orders. Financial trouble, I said, voice clipped. She'll be in touch. Her regulars got emails from a burner account, hinting at inventory issues and unreliable service. Sales tanked, her dream unraveling thread by thread. She'd feel the loss, just as I had. A week later, I got a call from Lisa. He's spiraling, she said, glee lacing her words. Saw him at the grocery store. Looked like he hadn't slept in days. I pictured him haggard and desperate, and it fueled me. I drained another chunk of his savings, rerouting it to charities he'd never support, ironic little jabs he'd never trace. His landlord had upped the pressure, too. Eviction notices plastered his door, courtesy of Tom's persistence. Mark was a rat in a cage, and I was tightening the bars. Clara tried to reach me once, a shaky voicemail left at midnight. We need to talk, she said, her voice small. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for this. I deleted it mid-sentence. Sorry didn't erase the images burned into my mind. Her with him, laughing, plotting, living a life I wasn't part of. She'd made her choice, and now she'd live with it. I blocked her number, severed the last thread. She didn't deserve my words, my forgiveness. She deserved nothing. I turned my attention to Mark's pride, his photography. He'd built a small name for himself, a portfolio of moody landscapes and stolen moments. I hacked his website, subtle at first. Typos in his bio, blurry images swapped in. Then I went harder, deleted galleries, replaced client testimonials with scathing fakes. Unprofessional, one read. Ghosted me mid-project, said another. His inbox filled with cancellations, his reputation crumbling like dry clay. I sent the doctored site link to his remaining contacts, a quiet sabotage that spread like wildfire. Nights alone were the hardest. The house felt too big, too empty. I'd pour a whiskey, stare at the walls, and let the anger simmer. Clara's betrayal wasn't just a wound. It was a map, guiding me to every dark corner of myself I'd ignored. I wasn't the man she'd married anymore. That man was gone, replaced by someone colder, sharper, ready to carve justice from their ruins. By mid-April, Mark was a ghost of himself. I'd followed him to a bar one night, watching from the shadows as he nursed a cheap beer, shoulders slumped. His camera sat untouched beside him, a relic of a life he couldn't reclaim. Clara wasn't with him. Rumors from mutual friends said they'd fought, her money drying up as the boutique faltered. I'd heard she was crashing with a cousin, scrambling to save what she could. Good. Let her scramble. Let her feel the ground give way beneath her, just as it had for me. I escalated. Using a VPN, I posted on local forums, anonymous rants about a freeloading photographer stiffing people, complete with Mark's name and a blurry photo. The threads exploded, old clients piling on with grievances I'd fabricated, but they believed. His phone buzzed nonstop, I imagined, with angry texts and blocked numbers. I sent a tip to a tabloid-style blog, too small-time but vicious. Local artist caught in love triangle scandal. The headline blared, with just enough truth to stick. Mark's name was mud, his ego a punching bag for strangers. Lisa met me again, her eyes gleaming. He called me yesterday, begging for cash, she said. Told him to rot. We toasted to his downfall, clinking glasses in a diner booth. She'd become more than an ally, a partner in this slow, delicious dismantling. I gave her screenshots of Mark's latest woes. Overdue bills, a repossessed car, and she laughed, a sound that mirrored the dark satisfaction coiling in my chest. Clara's boutique shut its doors that week. I drove by, saw the for lease sign, the windows dark. A piece of me ached, the part that remembered building it with her, painting walls, hanging her first display. But the ache drowned in the flood of her lies. She'd chosen this, chosen him. I snapped a photo of the empty storefront, sent it to her old email with no subject. Let her see it. Let it sting. Mark's eviction came on a rainy Thursday. I parked across the street, rain streaking my windshield, as movers hauled his junk to the curb. He argued with the landlord, voice hoarse, but it was done. Clara wasn't there. Word was she'd cut ties, unable to handle his collapse. I didn't care where she'd gone. Her ruin was collateral, a bonus I hadn't planned but welcomed. Mark loaded a battered suitcase into a cab, his camera slung over his shoulder like a lifeline. I followed at a distance, curious. He ended up at a cheap motel, the kind with flickering neon and stained carpets. Perfect. I checked his accounts, nearly empty. The last of his savings had gone to a bar tab, a desperate grab at numbness. I pushed further, locking him out of his email with a password reset he'd never guess. His cloud storage followed, wiped clean of every photo, every memory. Years of work, gone in a keystroke. He'd have nothing to rebuild with, no proof of the man he'd been. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of my screen casting shadows, and felt a rush of power I hadn't known I craved. Lisa called with an update. Mark had tried to pawn his camera, but the shop turned him away. Too scratched, too old. He's done, she said. You should see his face. I didn't need to. I saw it in my mind. Hollow eyes, trembling hands. A man who'd gambled on my wife and lost everything. I thanked Lisa, hung up, and poured another drink. The house was silent, but the quiet didn't haunt me anymore. It was mine now, a fortress I'd reclaimed. Clara surfaced online. A vague post about starting over. I didn't read the comments, her sob story didn't matter. She'd built her cage. Let her rot in it. My focus stayed on Mark, the architect of this mess. One final blow waited, and I'd deliver it soon, sharp and unforgiving. The motel became Mark's prison. I watched him shuffle in and out, head down, a man eroded by his own choices. I'd stripped him bare, money, work, pride, but it wasn't enough. He'd touched what was mine, defiled my trust, and I wanted him to feel that violation mirrored back. I found his sister's number in old records, a estranged sibling he'd burned years ago. I called her, voice low, and laid it out. His affair, his collapse, his desperation. "He's at the Sunset Motel," I said. "Thought you'd want to know." She hung up without a word, but I knew she'd act. Family wounds cut deep. 2 days later, she showed up. I watched from my car as they argued in the parking lot, her arms flailing, his face crumpling. She left him there, sobbing into his hands, the last tie severed. I smiled, cold and steady. He was alone now, truly alone. A fate worse than anything I could have scripted. But I wasn't done. I'd saved the best for last. A public unraveling he'd never recover from. I rented a billboard near his old studio, anonymous cash payment. It went up overnight. A blown-up photo of him and Clara, mid-laugh with bold text, "Mark Ellis, homewrecker and fraud." No explanation, just enough to spark whispers. By morning, his name was trending locally. Strangers speculating, old acquaintances piling on. I drove by, saw him staring at it from the sidewalk, shoulders shaking. He didn't know it was me, but he felt me. A phantom hand crushing what little he had left. Clara faded into the background, a footnote in my war. Mark was the prize, the symbol of every lie she'd fed me. I'd taken his world apart, piece by piece, and as I watched him break, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not yet, but a quiet, ironclad resolve. This was justice, my way, and it was only the beginning. The billboard was just the spark. I wanted the flames to consume him entirely. Mark's name buzzed through the city now, a cautionary tale whispered in coffee shops and shared online. People didn't know the full story, but they didn't need to. The image of him with Clara, paired with those damning words, painted a picture vivid enough to ruin him. I leaned into it, feeding the fire. Using burner accounts, I seeded more rumors. Half-truths about unpaid debts, abandoned projects, a man who charmed his way into lives only to leave wreckage behind. The internet did the rest, amplifying every jab until he was a pariah. I drove by the motel again, saw him pacing outside, phone pressed to his ear. Whoever he was begging, friends, family, anyone, clearly wasn't answering. His camera was gone, likely sold for scraps, and his clothes hung loose, stained with days of wear. He looked like a man unmoored, drifting toward nothing, and I savored it. Every step he took was one-eyed orchestrated. Every loss a note in the symphony of his collapse. Clara had unleashed this in me, but Mark was the canvas I'd chosen to paint my rage on. Lisa texted me a photo. Mark at a bar, slumped over a glass, ignored by the crowd. "He's a ghost," she wrote. "No one talks to him." I grinned, imagining the isolation closing in, a weight he couldn't shake. I'd taken his social currency, his lifeline, and left him with silence. But I wasn't satisfied yet. I wanted him to see his ruin reflected back, to know it was personal. So I planned the final act. Something intimate, inescapable, a mirror held up to his shattered soul. That night, I sifted through the last of his cloud backups, files I'd copied before wiping them. Photos mostly, Clara's smile, his smug grin, moments they'd stolen from me. I printed them, dozens of them, and stuffed them into an envelope. No note, just the images, raw and accusing. I mailed it to the motel, addressed to the man who took everything. Let him open it, let him drown in it. Let him wonder who knew, who watched, who hated him enough to do this. The envelope hit its mark. I knew it when I saw him next. He stumbled out of the motel, eyes wild, clutching the photos like they burned. He tore them in half, scattered them across the parking lot, but the damage was done. I watched from my car, rain tapping the roof, as he sank to his knees, hands clawing at his hair. He didn't know it was me, couldn't know, but he felt the weight of my gaze, the invisible hand that had stripped him bare. It was poetic, in a way, his affair with Clara captured in snapshots, now weaponized to haunt him. Word spread about his breakdown. A motel clerk posted online some blurry video of him ranting about someone out to get me. Locals laughed, called him paranoid, but I knew the truth. He wasn't wrong, just too late to stop it. I tightened the screws. I'd found an old lawsuit he'd dodged, a client he'd stiffed on a wedding shoot. I tipped off the lawyer, sent proof of Mark's whereabouts. Papers were served the next day, another noose around his neck. He couldn't pay, couldn't fight. Just another brick in the wall of his despair. Clara surfaced again, briefly. A friend mentioned she'd moved to a tiny apartment across town, working retail now, her boutique a memory. I didn't care enough to check. She was a shadow, a casualty of her own making, and my focus stayed on Mark. He was the root, the instigator, the man who'd looked at my life and seen something to plunder. I'd make sure he never forgot it, never climbed out of the hole I'd dug. I met Lisa one last time, over coffee this time. "You've outdone me," she said, half admiring, half wary. "He's nothing now." I nodded, stirring my cup. Nothing was the goal, not just broke, not just alone, but erased. She asked if I'd stop, if this was enough. I didn't answer. Enough wasn't a word I recognized anymore. Not until he was dust, and even then I wasn't sure. Mark's final unraveling came faster than I'd expected. The lawsuit hit him hard. Legal fees he couldn't cover. A court date he couldn't dodge. I heard through the grapevine he'd tried to sell his story to a cheap magazine. Some sob tale about being targeted. They didn't bite, too pathetic, too messy. I'd made him untouchable. A leper even the vultures wouldn't touch. The motel kicked him out soon after, tired of his late payments and drunken rants. He ended up on the street, a cardboard sign his only companion. "Photographer needs work." I drove by one evening, saw him huddled under a bridge, rain-soaked and shivering. His eyes darted, paranoid, as if he sensed me. I didn't stop, didn't need to. The sight was enough. Mark Ellis, the man who'd stolen my wife, reduced to begging for coins. I'd taken his home, his craft, his dignity, and left him with nothing but the echo of his mistakes. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not yet. There was one last piece, one final twist I'd been holding back. I kept his camera. Not the one he'd pawned, but an older model I'd found in Clara's things, tucked away like a secret. It still worked, loaded with photos. Some of her, some of them, a few of me from better days. I wiped it clean, then loaded it with new images. The billboard, the eviction, his crumpled figure in the motel lot. A gallery of his ruin, captured through his own lens. I tracked him down, left it in a plastic bag near his makeshift camp. No note, no explanation. He'd find it and he'd know. Someone had watched every step, planned every fall. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The house was still empty, but the silence felt earned, a trophy of my making. Mark was finished and Clara was a ghost. I'd reclaimed something, maybe not love, maybe not peace, but power. And that was enough for now. Weeks passed, and Mark faded from view. Whispers said he'd left town, hitchhiking north with nothing but a backpack and that camera. I didn't care where he went. His life was over here, and that's what mattered. The photos I'd left him were my parting gift, a permanent scar he'd carry wherever he ran. I imagined him flipping through them, hands trembling, the realization sinking in that this wasn't random, wasn't fate. Just me, methodical and merciless. It was the closest I'd come to closure, a jagged edge smoothed by his exile. Clara tried to rebuild, or so I heard. She'd taken a job at a chain store, folding shirts for minimum wage, her dreams of creativity buried under fluorescent lights. Mutual friends stopped mentioning her, sensing my indifference. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate was too alive, too warm. She was a stranger now, a footnote in a story I'd rewritten. The boutique's lease sold to a coffee shop, erasing her mark on the world. I drove by once, saw the new sign, and felt nothing. She'd built her cage. I just locked the door. I sold the house soon after. Too many memories lingered in the walls. Her laughter, our plans, the life I'd believed in. I moved to a condo downtown, minimalist and cold, a fresh slate. Friends said I seemed lighter, sharper, like I'd shed a skin. They weren't wrong. The man Clara married was gone, burned away in the fire of her betrayal. What remained was harder, more deliberate, a blade honed by pain. I didn't miss her, didn't miss us. I missed the ignorance, maybe, but that was long dead. Lisa stayed in touch, an odd friendship forged in vengeance. She'd moved on, to new job, new city, but we'd check in, trading updates like war veterans. Heard Mark's in a shelter somewhere, she said once, still clutching that camera. We laughed, a dark, shared triumph. She didn't ask about Clara, and I didn't offer. Our pact was complete, our targets dismantled. Life stretched ahead, uncharted, and I was ready for it. A year later, I was someone else entirely. The condo suited me. Clean lines, no clutter, a reflection of the man I'd become. Work thrived. I'd taken on bigger projects, my focus razor-sharp. Colleagues noticed, called me driven, relentless. They didn't know the why, didn't need to. Clara and Mark were ghosts, their shadows fading with each passing day. I'd heard Mark was spotted in a coastal town, washing dishes, his camera a relic he couldn't sell. Clara had vanished into obscurity, a name no one mentioned anymore. Their story was over, and mine was just beginning. I started running, mornings along the river, the rhythm purging the last of my anger. I dated again, casually, women drawn to my quiet intensity, my refusal to explain the scars. I didn't love them, didn't try to. Love was a risk I'd taken once, and it had hollowed me out. This was better, control, clarity, a life I dictated. Friends invited me to dinners, vacations, and I went, smiling, present, but always a step removed. They didn't see the architect behind my calm, the man who'd built a fortress from ruins. One evening, I found an old photo of Clara and me, tucked in a box I'd forgotten to unpack. Her smile, my arm around her, a moment from a different life. I stared at it, waiting for the ache, the rage. Nothing came. I tore it in half, tossed it in the trash, and poured a drink. The past was ash, scattered and cold. Mark's defeat, Clara's fall. They were my foundation now, a bedrock of lessons learned and power claimed. I stepped onto my balcony, city lights sprawling below. The world was mine again, not hers, not his. I'd taken it back, piece by brutal piece, and I'd never let it go. Revenge wasn't the end. It was the beginning, a fire that forged me anew. And as I sipped my whiskey, I knew I was free.